galaxy had seen countless battles, but none like the one that erupted when humans first set foot on the distant world of Xylar. The planet, covered in black stone mountains and endless stormy skies, had been ruled for centuries by a council of alien lords. To them, humans were nothing more than fragile creatures, too weak to survive the storms, too soft to endure the lashes of discipline they gave to their own people. Yet humans had arrived anyway, carrying nothing but stubbornness and courage. Their first encounter had not been peaceful. A human exploration vessel crashed near the heart of Xylar's capital, its engines torn apart by the planet's violent storms. The survivors were dragged before the council. Among them was a soldier named Daniel, a man scarred by past wars yet unbroken in spirit. The lords sneered at his endurance, claiming that humans would beg for mercy long before they ever broke. A true warrior of Xylar. The punishment that followed was not meant for him, but for one of their own. Standing in the council chamber was a young alien woman, her skin glowing blue against the torches that burned in the shadows. She was accused of treason, of speaking words in defense of the humans when the lords demanded their execution. Her defiance had enraged them, and the sentence was clear: 300 lashes. The chamber grew silent when the order was announced. Even among the harsh laws of Xylar, such a punishment was known to destroy the body and spirit of any who endured it. The alien girl stood tall, her silver hair falling over her shoulders, her eyes refusing to show fear. Yet every heart in the room knew she would not survive. The guards dragged her forward, their whips gleaming with cruel metal barbs, ready to strike. Daniel's heart thundered. He had seen cruelty before. He had seen friends fall in war, crushed beneath the weight of hopeless battles. But this was different. This was not war. This was torment. His fists clenched as he watched the young alien girl glance at him, not with desperation, but with something else: trust. As if in the middle of her doom she believed this human might stand for her. The first guard raised his arm, the whip curling in the air. The crowd leaned forward, waiting for the sound of pain, waiting for the moment that would prove once again that no one could defy the council. And then Daniel shouted, his voice cut through the chamber like thunder. "Give them to me." The words echoed against the stone walls. For a moment silence returned. The guards froze. The lords shifted in their seats, shocked that a human dared to raise his voice in their court. Daniel stepped forward, his gaze never leaving the young alien. "Girl," he pointed at himself, his voice firm, "she is not guilty. If punishment must be given, give it to me." A wave of whispers spread through the chamber. Some laughed, others gasped, and the lords leaned closer, intrigued. To them, this was foolishness. A human asking for 300 lashes was like asking for death itself. But Daniel's eyes showed no fear. They showed only resolve. The alien girl's lips parted slightly, her breath catching as she looked at him. No one had ever done this before. Not for her, not for anyone. A human was willing to take her pain. A human was ready to endure the impossible. The council's leader, draped in robes darker than the night sky, rose to his feet. His voice was deep, filled with cruel delight. "Very well, human. If you wish to suffer in her place, then let it be so. But know this, you will not last. No creature of flesh and blood can endure what you ask for." Daniel stood his ground. His hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the weight of what was about to come. He looked once more at the alien girl. Her eyes filled with disbelief and gave the smallest nod. The guards stepped closer, their whips ready. The crowd began to chant, eager to witness what they thought would be the breaking of a human spirit. But Daniel's heart only grew stronger. Whatever came, he would face it because humans endure all. The guards surrounded Daniel, their whips glinting in the firelight. The chamber, once filled with cruel laughter, now pulsed with curiosity. The lords leaned forward on their thrones, eager to see how long the human would last. The alien girl, her wrists bound with iron, watched in silence. She wanted to cry out, to tell him not to take her suffering, but the guards silenced her with a sharp pull of the chains. Daniel removed his torn jacket and stood barebacked before them. The air in the chamber felt colder now, the shadows deeper, every eye fixed on the human, waiting for the sound of his spirit breaking. The first lash came with a sound like fire cracking in the storm. The barbed whip tore across his back, leaving a line of crimson. The crowd roared, expecting a scream. But Daniel said nothing. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, yet his voice remained silent. A second lash fell, harder than the first. His body trembled, but still no cry came. The guards frowned. They had broken warriors stronger than steel, yet this fragile human did not yield. The alien girl's chest rose and fell as she watched him. Every strike that landed on his skin felt like it tore through her own heart. She could not understand it. Why would he do this for her? She was nothing to him, a stranger from another world. Yet here he stood, carrying her punishment as if it were his own burden to bear. By the 10th lash, his back was a canvas of blood and torn flesh. The crowd no longer laughed. Their voices grew quieter, whispers rising as confusion spread. The lords exchanged glances. This was not how the scene was meant to unfold. The human was supposed to collapse, to beg for mercy, to prove their weakness. Instead, he remained on his feet. Daniel's breathing grew heavier, each strike pushing him closer to his limit. Memories flooded his mind, memories of his childhood on Earth, of his training, of battles where men had fallen beside him. He remembered the faces of comrades who had died with honor, refusing to bow to pain. And so he refused too. His voice echoed in his own thoughts. Humans endure. Humans endure. The guards struck again and again. By the time 50 lashes had been delivered, the chamber was silent except for the crack of the whip. Sweat poured down, Daniel's face mixing with the blood on his back, but his eyes burned with fire. He turned his head slightly toward the alien girl, and for a brief moment, she saw him smile. That smile shattered something inside her. She had grown up under the rule of cruelty, where no one stood for another, where mercy was weakness. Yet here was a man from another world, showing her what strength truly was, not in domination, but in sacrifice. The leader of the council rose once again, his voice cutting through the silence. Impressive, human, but you will not endure 300. Already your flesh weakens. Already your spirit trembles. Do you still wish to continue? Daniel's voice was hoarse, broken from the effort of holding back his pain. But when he spoke, it rang clear for all to hear. Yes. Gasps spread through the chamber. Some of the alien warriors shifted uneasily. The lords' faces darkened, but their pride would not allow them to end the punishment early. To admit weakness in their judgment was unthinkable. The guards prepared to continue. The alien girl closed her eyes, whispering words in her native tongue, words of prayer, of hope, of desperate faith. She could not watch, but she could not turn away either. The next lash fell and the chamber held its breath. The human still stood, and for the first time in centuries, the council began to wonder if perhaps they had underestimated the strength of humankind. The whips cracked again, tearing deeper into Daniel's back. His skin was raw, his muscles trembled with every strike, yet he stood as if his very bones refused to let him fall. The chamber no longer echoed with laughter. Instead, there was only silence, broken by the rhythm of the lashes and the steady sound of Daniel's breathing. By the 75th lash, his knees wavered. The guard smirked, believing his strength was finally ending. But Daniel clenched, his fists, digging his nails into his palms so hard that blood dripped from his hands. He would not collapse. Not here. Not in front of them. The alien girl strained against her chains, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Stop, please, stop." The words slipped out without her meaning to. She had never begged before, never allowed her voice to sound weak, but watching him suffer in her place felt like a wound she could not close. The council's leader leaned forward, eyes glinting with cruel delight. "You see, child? This is What happens when the weak try to play the role of the strong? He will fall. They always fall. But as if in defiance of those words, Daniel lifted his head. His voice came out low, shaking but filled with iron. I will not fall. Gasps echoed across the chamber. Even some of the guards faltered, their hands hesitating before lifting the whip again. They had seen warriors scream, beg, and break under fewer lashes than this. Yet this human's will was unshakable. By the 100th lash, blood soaked the stones beneath Daniel's feet. His back was a map of pain, each strike carving fresh agony into him. Still, he stood, his vision blurred, the edges of the chamber, swimming like shadows in the storm, but his resolve burned brighter than the firelight around him. The alien girl's eyes filled with tears. She had not cried since she was a child, but now they streamed down her face. To her people, strength was measured by cruelty. But Daniel showed another kind of strength, one that no lash could break. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some of the alien warriors looked at each other uncertain. They had mocked humans as fragile, yet here was proof that fragility was not weakness. It was endurance. It was the fire to keep standing, even when the body screamed to collapse. The guards' arms grew heavy, sweat dripping from their brows as they struck again and again. It was not the human who seemed to be breaking, but those who punished him. One guard muttered under his breath, "Enough. This is no longer justice." The council leader snapped his head toward him, fury blazing in his eyes. "Silence! The sentences 300 and 300 will be given." The guard swallowed his words, but the doubt remained. Daniel drew in a deep, ragged breath. He turned his head just enough to see the alien girl watching him. Her chains rattled as she pulled against them, her face filled with helplessness. And then he spoke again, his voice a whisper meant only for her. "Do not cry. You are not alone." Those words shattered the last wall in her heart. She had been raised to believe kindness was weakness, that no one would ever stand beside her. Yet here was a man from another world, bleeding for her, reminding her that even in the darkest chamber, light could still exist. By the 150th lash, Daniel's body was shaking violently, every nerve screaming. His vision dimmed, but he clenched his jaw, refusing to give the council the satisfaction of seeing him fall. His endurance was no longer just about survival. It had become defiance, a symbol that humans would not bow, not to pain, not to cruelty, not to fear. And as he stood there, drenched in blood yet unbroken, something stirred in the hearts of those watching. For the first time, the people of Xylar began to wonder if perhaps humanity's greatest weapon was not strength of flesh, but strength of spirit. The chamber smelled of iron and smoke, heavy with the scent of blood. Daniel's back was torn open, every lash leaving fresh rivers of red across his skin. Yet he still stood. His breath came in harsh bursts, his chest rising and falling like a storm-tossed sea, but his legs remained firm beneath him. The guards, who had once swung the whips with mocking grins, now looked uneasy. By the 170th lash, the whispers of the crowd had grown louder. The alien citizens filling the gallery shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes wide. They had come expecting to see a human beg, to laugh at his weakness. Instead, they watched in silence as he defied every expectation. The alien girl, strained against her chains again, her wrists raw from the iron cuffs. She had stopped crying now. Instead, her tears had turned to something else. Anger. Anger at the council, anger at her people, anger at herself, forever believing she was alone. Each time the whip cracked across Daniel's back, she whispered to herself, "Stand, please stand." The council leader slammed his hand down on the arm of his throne. "Continue, do not falter." His voice thundered through the chamber, but it sounded less like command and more like desperation. The guards obeyed, but their movements were slower. By the 200th lash, their arms ached and their hearts faltered. They had whipped countless warriors into dust, yet this one human still stood, his knees buckling but never falling. Daniel's vision blurred. Darkness crept at the edges of his sight, threatening to swallow him whole. But deep inside, a fire still burned. He remembered his comrades on Earth, the men and women who had endured wars no one thought they could win. He remembered the words drilled into him. Pain ends. Honor does not. He bit down hard, tasting blood in his mouth, and forced himself to stay upright. He was not standing for himself anymore. He was standing for the alien girl who watched him, with trembling eyes. He was standing for every human who would one day walk this world and be judged. He would not let them say humans broke easily. The council leader's face twisted into frustration. He leaned toward his fellow lords. This cannot continue. If he survives all 300, our rule will be mocked. Our people will see weakness in us. One of the lords whispered back, and yet if we stop now, they will see weakness still. The human has trapped us. The leader growled, realizing the truth. Daniel had turned their punishment into a trial not of his endurance, but of their pride. At the 220th lash, the crowd began to murmur louder. Some voices rose in Daniel's favor. Enough, one alien warrior called out from the gallery. He has proven his strength. Another shouted, Release him. No one should endure this much. The leader slammed his staff against the floor, silencing them. His pride could not allow the spectacle to end. He will take all 300, he roared. The guards hesitated, their eyes flicking between Daniel's trembling form and the furious lord. Finally, they raised their whips again. The alien girl's voice rose above the silence, sharp and clear. Stop this. Can you not see? He is stronger than all of you. Her words cut through the chamber like a blade. For the first time, the council members faltered. The people looked at her, then at Daniel, and doubt spread like fire through dry grass. The whip cracked once more. Daniel stumbled, his knees hitting the stone floor for a brief moment. The crowd gasped, thinking he would finally fall. But with a guttural cry, he pushed himself back up, blood streaming down his body. The guards stared in disbelief. The alien girl's eyes widened. The crowd erupted in shouts, some calling for mercy, others demanding more. And in that moment, everyone realized the truth. The punishment was no longer breaking the human. It was breaking the council. The air inside the chamber was heavy, thick with silence broken only by the sharp crack of the whip. Daniel's body trembled with every strike now, his legs shaking as if they might finally give out. His back was no longer just marked with lashes. It was shredded, a ruin of torn flesh and blood. Yet still he stood. The crowd had changed. Where once they came for spectacle, now they sat frozen, their faces pale. Mothers clutched their children close. Warriors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and whispers of disbelief spread like wildfire. How is he still alive? One voice whispered. Another muttered, he is not just surviving, he is defying them. The alien girl's chains rattled as she pulled against them again. Her wrist bled from the struggle, but she did not care. Her eyes never left Daniel. Every lash that struck him tore at her heart, but her voice remained steady. Stand, human. Please stand. By the 250th lash, the guards themselves faltered. Sweat streamed down their foreheads. Their arms ached, their hands blistered from gripping the whips. They looked at one another, and for the first time in their lives, they feared not their enemies, but their orders. The council leader rose too, his feet fury twisting his face. Continue, he thundered. His voice was hoarse, more desperate than commanding. He knew the people were watching, and if the punishment ended now, it would not be the human who seemed weak, but him. The guards obeyed, but their strikes lacked conviction. Each lash fell slower, weaker, as if even they no longer believed in what they were doing. Daniel's vision was fading. The chamber swam before his eyes. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to collapse, to give in, to let the pain win. But something stronger kept him standing. He thought of Earth, the home he might never see again. He thought of his comrades, those who had fought and died so that others could live. He thought of the alien girl, her silver hair shining in the dim firelight, her eyes filled with both sorrow and hope. And so he endured. The 260th lash fell, and Daniel let out a groan. the first sound of pain he had allowed. The crowd gasped, leaning forward, yet he did not fall. He clenched his fists tighter, his knuckles white, his blood dripping down his arms. He refused to bow. By the 270th lash, the gallery was no longer silent. Voices rose, loud and angry. "Enough!" one shouted. "This is no longer justice, it is madness." Another voice rang out. "Release him! He has proven his strength 100 times over." The council leader's face twisted with rage. "Silence!" he bellowed, but his words carried no weight now. The people no longer looked at him with fear, but with contempt. Their eyes turned back to Daniel, the broken human who still stood tall. The alien girl cried out suddenly, her voice echoing in the chamber. "Can you not see? He is stronger than your laws, stronger than your whips, stronger than all of you together." Her words lit a fire in the hearts of the people. Murmurs became shouts. Some even stood from their seats, pointing toward the council in defiance. The guards hesitated, their hands shaking as they lifted their whips again. They were soldiers, but they were also men, and what they saw before them was not weakness but greatness. The council leader roared in fury, pointing at Daniel. "Strike him! Strike until he falls!" But the next lash did not fall. The guard holding the whip froze, his hand trembling. He looked at Daniel, then at the crowd, then at the alien girl whose chains rattled as she cried out. For the first time, he lowered his arm. The chamber erupted into chaos. Shouts filled the air, some demanding the punishment end, others urging rebellion. The council leader slammed his staff against the floor, but the sound was drowned by the voices of his own people rising against him. Daniel swayed, his body moments from collapse. Yet even through the blood and the pain, he managed one more glance toward the alien girl. His lips moved soundlessly, but she understood the words. "You are free." And as the people's voices thundered through the chamber, it became clear that the human had already won, long before the final lash could ever fall. The council chamber shook with noise. The people, once silent observers, now shouted in anger. Some rose from their seats, their fists pounding against the stone rails. The guards, who had been trained all their lives to obey without question, shifted uneasily under the weight of so many eyes. Daniel stood in the center of it all, swaying on his feet. His back was a ruin of blood and torn flesh, but his spirit blazed. He no longer heard the cracks of the whip, only the thunder of his own heart and the cries of the crowd. Rising around him, the council leader slammed his staff against the floor. "Enough of this noise, he will finish the lashes." His voice was sharp, but it trembled. For the first time in decades, he felt the chamber slipping from his control. One of the guards stepped forward, whip in hand, but his face was pale. His arm shook as he raised it. He looked not at the council, but at the human before him. Daniel lifted his head, his eyes half closed, yet filled with fire. That gaze froze the guard. Slowly, almost shamefully, he lowered the whip again. The crowd erupted with cheers. "He defies you," someone shouted, "and he stands stronger than any of us." The alien girl pulled hard against her chains, her wrists bleeding, but her voice was strong. "Release him, you see the truth. No law, no council, no whip can break him." The council leader's face twisted in rage. He turned on the guard who had lowered his weapon. "Coward, do your duty." But another guard stepped forward, this one casting his whip aside. "I will not strike him again," he said firmly. His voice carried across the chamber. "He has proven more strength than any I've ever seen." The people roared with approval. More guards hesitated, their loyalty wavering. The council leader's voice grew desperate. "Do you betray your oaths? Do you defy the council?" Daniel swayed, his body moments from collapse, but his voice cut through the noise. "They do not defy justice. They defy cruelty." His words rang like iron, steady even through his broken body. The alien girl's heart surged with pride. She had never seen anyone speak to the council this way, and now the human had given the people the courage to rise. The council members leaned toward each other, whispering furiously. Fear began to creep across their faces. This punishment, meant to display their strength, had become their downfall. By the 285th lash, only one guard still obeyed. His whip cracked weakly, striking Daniel's back with little force. The man's hand trembled so badly he could barely lift it. The others had stepped back, their weapons dropped, their eyes fixed on the human who had endured what none of them believed possible. The people began to chant. At first, it was scattered, uncertain, but soon the whole chamber echoed with it. "Release him, release him!" The chant thundered louder, shaking the stone walls. The council leader slammed his staff again and again, but his voice was drowned by the roar of the crowd. His rule, once unquestioned, now looked fragile. Daniel's body leaned forward, his knees nearly buckling. Yet somehow he forced himself upright again. His lips moved, and though his voice was little more than a whisper, those nearest heard him. "Humans, endure." The alien girl's chains rattled as she cried out with all her strength. "And because of him, so will we." Her words swept through the chamber, igniting the fire that had been growing in the hearts of the people. They shouted louder, their voices no longer filled with fear but with defiance. The council leader's eyes blazed with fury, but his hands shook on the staff. He could see it now. The people no longer belonged to him. They belonged to the symbol standing broken and bloodied before them. And as the final lashes neared, the question was no longer whether the human would fall, but whether the council itself could survive what they had unleashed. The chamber felt like a storm on the edge of breaking. The air trembled with shouts, the torches flickered wildly, and the guards no longer looked like enforcers but prisoners of their own doubt. Daniel stood at the center of it all, his body broken beyond recognition. His back was carved with deep wounds, his shoulders bent forward and blood ran freely down his legs. Every breath rattled his chest as though the next might be his last. But still, he stood. The alien girl's eyes never left him. She whispered, his name softly, as if the sound of her voice alone might keep him alive. She had never believed in miracles, yet here he was, creating one before her eyes. The council leader's face was red with fury. His grip tightened around his staff until his knuckles turned pale. "Finish it," he shouted. 300. He must fall. Only one guard still obeyed. His hand trembled as he raised the whip again. The others had already cast theirs, aside, unwilling to take part in what had become a disgrace. The whip cracked through the air and struck Daniel across the back. His body jolted violently, his knees nearly giving way. The crowd gasped, holding their breath. For a moment it looked as if he would collapse, but then he lifted his head. His eyes, bloodshot and weak, still carried fire. He straightened, his legs shaking but unbroken. The guard struck again. The 290th lash, then the 291st. Each one tore more of Daniel's strength away, yet none could make him kneel. The crowd was no longer silent. Their voices shook the stone chamber. "Enough! Enough!" they cried. Some pressed forward, straining against the guards who held them back. Others raised their fists, shouting not in fear but in fury. The council leader roared above the noise. "He is nothing, a beast pretending to be strong. Do not let his defiance fool you." But even as he shouted, he could see the truth in the faces around him. The people no longer looked at him with loyalty. They looked at the human, battered and bleeding, yet still unbroken. By the 295th lash, Daniel's body swayed like a dying flame. His breath came in ragged gasps. His vision dimmed, his head dropping forward. The crowd leaned forward with him, their voices desperate. "Stand! Stand!" they chanted, as if their cries alone could hold him upright. The alien girl pulled so hard at her chains that blood poured from her wrists. Her voice rose above the crowd, strong and desperate. "You are not alone. Do not fall. You carry us all." Her words pierced through Daniel's haze of pain. Somewhere deep inside, past the agony, past the exhaustion, something stirred. He remembered her eyes when the sentence was given, eyes filled with quiet defiance. He remembered the moment she looked at him, trusting him with her life. That memory gave him one last ember of strength. The whip cracked again. 296, then 97, then 98. The crowd screamed with each strike, Some guards stepped forward, blocking the view, ashamed of what was happening. Others looked at the people, then at the human, their loyalty slipping away with every lash. At the 299th, Daniel stumbled forward, blood dripping onto the stones. The chamber held its breath. The guard raised his arm for the last time, his face pale, his hand trembling. The whip fell. The 300th lash struck. Daniel's knees buckled. The crowd cried out. But with a cry that came from the very core of his being, Daniel forced himself upright again. His body shook violently, blood pouring down his back, but he stood tall, his head raised toward the council. The chamber exploded with sound. The people roared, their voices echoing like thunder. Some wept, some cheered, but all knew they had witnessed something greater than cruelty. They had seen a man who could not be broken. The alien girl screamed with joy, tears streaming down her face. He has endured. He has endured. And in that moment, the council's power cracked, not with steel or war, but with the unbreakable spirit of a single human. The roar of the crowd thundered through the chamber. The stone walls shook with the force of their voices. He endured. He endured. They cried, their words rolling together like the sound of a storm. Daniel stood at the center of it all, his back a ruin of blood, his body trembling as though a single gust of wind might topple him. He had endured the impossible, yet the cost was clear. His legs wavered, his breathing came in shallow gasps, and his eyes flickered as if fighting to remain open. The alien girl cried out, her chains clattering as she pulled against them with desperate strength. "Release me! Let me go to him!" she shouted. Her voice was no longer the voice of a prisoner. It carried the fire of someone who had seen truth. The guards hesitated. Some looked to the council for orders, but the lords sat frozen on their thrones. The council leader's face was pale with fury and fear. He slammed his staff down. "Silence! He is nothing but flesh and blood. His pain proves nothing." But even as he shouted, his words rang hollow. No one looked at him. All eyes were on the human. Daniel swayed, his knees finally buckling. He collapsed onto the stone floor, his hands catching him just before his body struck the ground fully. The crowd gasped, then screamed, rushing forward as if their voices alone could hold him up. The alien girl screamed his name, her voice breaking. Her chains cut deeper into her wrists as she fought to break free. The sight of him falling tore her apart. She had believed him unbreakable, yet now he lay bleeding and she could not reach him. A guard, one who had lowered his whip earlier, moved suddenly. Without asking permission, he crossed to the girl's side and struck the chains with his blade. The iron split, clattering to the ground. She stumbled forward, free for the first time since her arrest. The crowd roared with approval, their voices shaking the chamber. The guard did not meet the council's eyes. He simply said, "No more." The alien girl rushed to Daniel's side, dropping to her knees beside him. She slid her arms beneath him, lifting his head into her lap. His blood stained her skin, but she did not care. Her tears fell onto his face as she whispered, "You saved me. You saved us all." Daniel's eyes fluttered open. His lips moved weakly, his voice little more than a rasp. "You are free." Her heart broke at his words. He thought only of her freedom, not his own survival. She pressed her forehead against his, whispering fiercely, "No, you are not done. You will live." The council leader rose to his feet, his voice cracking with rage. Seize them both." But the people no longer obeyed. They surged forward, climbing down from the gallery, shouting in defiance. "No more lashes, no more chains." Their chants filled the air, drowning the council's orders. The remaining loyal guards tried to push the crowd back, but others cast down their weapons, joining the people. Chaos spread through the chamber like fire. The alien girl shielded Daniel with her body, glaring at the council with eyes that burned. For the first time in her life, she felt no fear. His strength had become hers. His endurance had become her voice. Daniel's hand weakly found hers. His grip was faint, but steady. "Do not let them win," he whispered. She held his hand, tightly, her tears falling freely. "I swear it. You are not alone." The council leader's voice was lost beneath the roar of rebellion. The people pressed closer, their fury rising higher with each passing moment. The punishment meant to prove human weakness had instead broken centuries of silence. And as Daniel lay in her arms, his blood staining the floor of the chamber, the world of Xylar trembled on the edge of change. The chamber was no longer a court of judgment. It had become a battlefield of voices and defiance. The crowd surged forward, pressing against the guards who still clung to their orders. Shouts of freedom and no more chains echoed, like thunder, each cry shaking the walls. The council leader raised his staff high, his face twisted with rage. "Strike them down, all of them. Do not let this human's trick destroy our rule." But his command fell flat. The guards hesitated. Some stepped back, uncertain, their eyes darting between the furious lords and the roaring people. Others cast down their weapons entirely, unwilling to fight against the tide. The alien girl knelt beside Daniel, her arms wrapped around him as if her embrace could shield him from the chaos. His breathing was shallow, each breath drawn with visible effort. Yet even as weak as he was, his eyes still burned with that same unyielding fire. She pressed her forehead to his and whispered, "You have given them courage. You have given me strength. Rest now. I will carry your voice." When she rose, her chains broken and her wrists raw, the people's eyes turned to her. She had been marked for death, but now she stood tall, her silver hair flowing as the torches flickered around her. Her voice rose above the noise, sharp and clear. "Look at him," she cried, pointing to Daniel. 300 lashes could not break him. Not their whips, not their cruelty, not their pride. Do you not see? Their rule is built on fear, and fear has already fallen. The crowd roared in agreement. The people pounded their fists against the stone, their voices merging into one. The council leader's face went pale. He slammed his staff again, shouting for silence, but no one listened. His fellow lords looked at one another nervously, realizing that for the first time in centuries the people no longer feared them. Daniel stirred weakly on the ground, his lips moving. The alien girl knelt quickly beside him, catching his whisper. "Tell them, humans endure. Together they can too." She rose again, her voice carrying his words like a banner. "Humans endure," she shouted, her voice ringing across the chamber. "And so can we. No more lashes, no more chains. Stand. Together, stand free," the people erupted. They surged forward in a wave, some seizing the weapons dropped by guards, others tearing down the council's banners from the walls. The once silent gallery now shook with the cries of rebellion. The council leader stumbled back, his staff slipping from his grip. "This is treason," he shouted desperately. "This is madness." But the people no longer heard him. They only heard the chant that had grown louder than any whip, any order, any fear. "Endure! Endure!" Guards who had once served the council now turned against them, forming a protective circle around Daniel and the alien girl. One of them, the same who had freed her chains, spoke with a steady voice. "Your strength has shown us the truth. We will not raise our hands against the people anymore." The alien girl met his gaze and nodded, her heart swelling with hope and fury both. She looked back at Daniel, whose eyes fluttered open for a moment. He gave her the faintest of smiles, and in that smile she saw not just survival but victory. The council leader's voice broke into a desperate scream. "Seize them! Stop this rebellion!" But his words dissolved into nothing as the people surged up the steps, pushing past the guards, reaching for the thrones that had ruled them with fear for so long. The alien girl raised her voice one last time, her hand held high above her head. "No more fear. Today we endure." The chamber erupted with cheers. The council's power cracked like glass beneath the weight of the people's roar. And as the banners fell, as the crowd pressed forward in defiance, Daniel's sacrifice became more than survival. It became the spark of revolution. The chamber had become chaos. The people surged forward, sweeping past the guards who no longer resisted. Torches fell, banners were torn down, and the proud stone walls echoed with a chant that would never be forgotten. Endure, endure. The council leader stumbled back toward his throne, his once proud voice lost in the thunder of rebellion. His fellow lords abandoned him, slipping into the shadows, their robes dragging across the stone as they fled. For centuries, fear had held the people silent. Now fear itself was broken. The alien girl stood tall, her silver hair glowing in the torchlight as she raised her voice again. No more chains, no more lashes, today we are free. Her words struck the chamber like lightning. The people cheered, their fists pounding the air in unison. At the center of it all, Daniel lay on the cold stone floor, his body broken, but his spirit blazing. He stirred faintly, his voice little more than a whisper. Did we win? The alien girl dropped to her knees beside him, tears filling her eyes. She cupped his face in her hands, her voice soft but fierce. Yes, Daniel. You won. You gave us all the strength to rise. A guard knelt nearby, one who had cast down his whip. His voice carried reverence. 300 lashes should have killed him, yet he endured. No one can deny his strength. Now. The people pressed closer, but not with anger now. They knelt, one after another, lowering their heads toward Daniel. It began with a single warrior, then another, until the whole chamber was filled with the sight of aliens bowing to a human. The chant rose again, but this time softer, filled with awe. Endure, endure. Daniel's eyes flickered open. He saw them, hundreds, maybe thousands, kneeling where once they had mocked. His lips curved into a faint smile. Then it was worth it. The alien girl's tears fell freely, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of pride. She pressed her forehead to his and whispered, Rest, human. Your name will live forever. Outside the chamber, the rebellion spread through the city. Word of the human who had taken 300 lashes without falling carried like wildfire through the streets. The people rose, tearing down the banners of the council, breaking the chains of prisoners and shouting Daniel's name into the storm-filled skies. By nightfall, the council was gone. Some fled into exile, others were seized by the very guards who once served them. The people no longer lived in fear. Their eyes were turned instead toward the human who had bled for them. Daniel was carried from the chamber by gentle hands, wrapped not in chains but in the cloth of honor. The alien girl never left his side, her hand clasped tightly around his. She whispered promises to him, promises that his sacrifice would never be forgotten. In the days that followed, a new council was formed, not of lords who ruled with cruelty, but of leaders chosen by the people. And at the heart of their banners was a single word, painted in bold strokes: endure. Daniel's wounds healed slowly, each day a battle of its own. But each time he opened his eyes, he saw the alien girl by his side. Her silver hair framed her face, her gaze steady and filled with warmth. She had once been a prisoner, marked for death. Now she was free, and she was his greatest reason to keep fighting for life. On the day he could finally stand again, the people gathered in the great square. They fell silent as he walked forward, weak but upright, the alien girl supporting him. He raised his head and spoke with a voice still rough but unbroken. Pain can break the body, fear can chain the spirit, but endurance makes us free. The people roared, their voices carrying across the city, across the world, and into the storm-filled skies of Xylar. And so the legend of the human who endured 300 lashes was born. Not just a story of pain, but a story of hope. A story that would be told for generations. A story of how one human with nothing but his will freed a world.